I think it's probably too soon to tell and too soon to say. But obviously pretty gutted about the decision. We thought it was going to go our way.
Prince Harry thought leaving the royal family would give him freedom. But suddenly, something he never expected happened. His inheritance has been frozen. And now, Prince William has quietly confirmed that their mother, Princess Diana, once warned about this exact kind of heartbreak. Love, loyalty, and family ties are colliding in ways no one could predict. Was it Meghan's influence, royal rules, or fate itself that set these events in motion? What really lies behind Diana's hidden prophecy, and how far will it reach? Join us to find out. The silence after the choice. The morning sun feels different when you wake up thousands of miles away from the only home you have ever known. Prince Harry opens his eyes in California, where the palm trees sway gently outside his window and the ocean breeze carries the scent of salt and freedom. Everything here is new. Everything here is his choice. But choices, he is learning, are not always simple. They do not come with clear endings or happy music playing in the background. They come with silence, and sometimes silence is the loudest sound of all. Harry used to wake up to the sound of footsteps echoing down long hallways. He used to hear the rustling of newspapers being delivered, the quiet murmur of staff preparing breakfast, and the distant chime of ancient clocks that had been ticking for hundreds of years. Those sounds were the heartbeat of a palace, the rhythm of a life that stretched back through generations. Now, he wakes to birdsong and the hum of cars passing by. It is peaceful, it is calm, but it is also strange, like wearing shoes that almost fit but pinch in places you cannot quite name. He chose this life. He chose to step away from the golden gates and the heavy crown that was never quite his to wear anyway. He chose love and privacy and the chance to breathe without cameras flashing in his face. He chose to protect the people he cares about most, and he does not regret it. Not really. But regret is a tricky thing. It does not always announce itself with tears or anger. Sometimes it simply sits quietly in the corner of your heart, whispering questions you are not ready to answer. Harry feels safe here. He feels like he can finally be himself without the whole world watching and judging every move. He can walk to the store without causing a scene. He can laugh without worrying if it looks proper. He can be a father and a husband without ancient rules telling him how it should be done. This is what he wanted. This is what he needed. But there is something else too, something he did not expect. He feels cut off, like a branch that has been gently removed from a very old tree. The branch is still alive, still green, still growing, but it is no longer connected to the roots. Back across the ocean, behind those palace walls he left behind, things are changing. Life does not stop just because you walk away from it. The family he was born into keeps moving forward, making decisions, holding meetings, planning for the future. And Harry is not there. He does not sit at the table anymore. He does not get the phone calls about important matters. He is still a prince by birth, still carries the royal blood in his veins, but the distance is not just about miles on a map. It is about belonging. It is about being part of something bigger than yourself, even when that something feels too heavy to carry. Inheritance is a funny word. Most people think it means money or jewels or big houses with too many rooms. But Harry is learning that inheritance is so much more than that. It is the stories your grandmother told you by the fireplace. It is the traditions passed down through centuries, even the ones that made you feel trapped. It is knowing your place in a long line of people who came before you and will come after you. It is a memory stitched into every corner of every room. It is the feeling of walking where your ancestors walked and knowing, deep in your bones, that you belong there. Harry does not have all the answers yet. He sits with his morning coffee, watching the California sunshine paint everything gold, and he wonders, something has shifted back home. He can feel it in the way conversations grow careful when his name comes up. He can sense it in the spaces between words during rare phone calls. He can almost hear it in the silence that follows his questions about family matters. What exactly has he lost? And more importantly, when did it slip away? Was it the moment he announced he was leaving? Was it gradual, like sand falling through an hourglass? Or is it still happening now, this very moment, while he sits safe and far away in his chosen life? The questions hang in the air like morning mist, yet answers rarely appear on their own. They arrive through people, through moments that change the direction of a life without asking for permission. And long before Harry could name what he was losing, someone had already stepped into his world, bringing clarity, courage, and a new way of seeing everything he had been taught to accept. Stay tuned to find out the individual's identity, the woman who changed the equation. Meghan Markle arrived in Harry's life like a breath of fresh air through a window that had been sealed shut for centuries. She was an actress, a woman who had built her own career with her own hands, someone who knew what it meant to stand on a stage and speak her truth. She came from a world where you could reinvent yourself, where your past did not have to define your future, where questions were encouraged and traditions could be challenged. She walked into the royal family with hope in her heart and dreams of making a difference. But she walked into something far more complicated than she could have imagined. The palace was not just a building, it was a system, an ancient machine with gears that had been turning the same way for 1,000 years. Everyone had their place. Everyone knew the rules, even the ones that were never spoken out loud. You did not ask why things were done a certain way, you simply did them. You wore the right clothes, attended the right events, smiled at the right moments, and kept your personal thoughts tucked safely away where no one could see them. This was how it had always been. This was how it was meant to stay. Meghan saw things differently. She saw rules that did not make sense. She saw traditions that felt cold and empty. She saw people suffering in silence because speaking up was considered improper. And she asked questions. Why must we do it this way? What if we tried something new? Could we not make this better, kinder, more human? These were not bad questions. They were honest questions. But in a place where everything runs on unspoken agreements and careful silence, honest questions can feel like earthquakes. She wanted to protect herself and the family she was building with Harry. She wanted control over her own story, her own image, her own life. In her old world, this made perfect sense. You took charge of your narrative. You built boundaries. You said no to things that harmed you. But in the royal world, control was something you surrendered the moment you joined. Your life became public property. Your story was told by others, and boundaries were considered selfish, even when they were necessary for survival. Behind closed doors, in private conversations that the world would never hear, decisions were being made. Meghan and Harry talked late into the night about what kind of life they wanted. They dreamed of independence, of stepping back from royal duties while still supporting the family from a distance. They imagined keeping one foot in each world, balancing old loyalty with new freedom. It seemed possible in those quiet moments when it was just the two of them against the world. But what happens in private does not stay private when you are royal. Every decision has consequences that ripple outward like stones thrown into a pond. When they announced their plans to step back, to live part-time in another country, to earn their own money while still being part of the family, the palace machinery groaned and shuddered. This had never been done before. There was no blueprint for half in, half out. The system did not know how to process this new equation. Protection is a beautiful thing when it keeps you safe, but protection can also become a cage when it stops you from breathing. Meghan felt trapped by the very structures meant to guard her. The security, the protocols, the endless rules about what she could and could not say or do began to feel less like safety and more like prison walls. She needed air. She needed freedom. She needed to feel like a person again, not just a piece on a chessboard moved by invisible hands. And so they left. Not all at once, not with anger or drama, but with a firm decision to choose their own path. Harry stood beside her, his hand in hers, ready to build something different. He loved her. He believed in her vision of a life where they could be themselves. But love, powerful as it is, cannot erase the complicated web of family, duty, and history that Harry was born into. Here is where something shifted, something quiet and legal and deeply significant. The inheritance that had been waiting for Harry, the fortune tied to his royal position and his place in the family structure, could not simply follow him into his new life. Not because anyone was being cruel or punishing him, but because the rules that governed these things were written long ago. They were designed for a different kind of prince, one who stayed within the system, who accepted the duties along with the privileges. When Harry stepped away from royal duties, when he chose independence over tradition, the conditions changed. The trust funds, the arrangements, the carefully planned financial structures all had terms attached to them. They had expectations built into their very foundation. And when those expectations were no longer being met, the money could not flow the same way. It became frozen, not by a single person's decision, but by the legal framework itself responding to new circumstances. Meghan did not touch the inheritance with her own hands. She did not demand that Harry give up his birthright. But her presence, her influence, her very different way of seeing the world helped Harry find the courage to make choices that changed everything. She was the catalyst, the force that set change in motion. Can love cost someone their legacy? Can choosing your heart mean losing your history? These are not simple questions with easy answers. They sit heavy in the space between what was and what is, waiting for time to reveal their truth. But these questions were not new. They had been asked before, quietly, painfully, by someone who understood their cost better than anyone else, long before love became a choice and legacy became a risk. The inheritance that was never just money. Diana knew what it felt like to be alone in a crowded room. She knew how the palace walls could hold you so tightly that even breathing felt like an act of rebellion. She understood the weight of smiling when your heart was breaking, of waving to cheering crowds while feeling invisible inside your own life. And because she knew all of this, because she had lived it with every fiber of her being, she made a promise to herself long before her sons were grown. She would protect them. She would give them something that could not be taken away by titles or traditions or the cold machinery of royal duty. When Diana thought about the future, she saw her boys clearly. William, the eldest, would one day be king. His path was set in stone, carved out by centuries of history. He would have the crown, the throne, and all the responsibility that came with it. But Harry, her youngest, her spare, would need something different. He would need a safety net made not of protocol but of real, tangible security. He would need to know that even if he felt lost, even if the royal world became too much, he would have something solid to stand on. So Diana made arrangements. She set aside money, carefully planned and legally protected, meant to give her sons freedom when they needed it most. This was not pocket change or a simple gift. This was a lifeline, a promise from a mother who would not always be there to hold their hands. She wanted them to have choices. She wanted them to be able to walk away if the palace became a prison, just as it had been for her. But Diana was wise in ways that went beyond money. She had seen how easily people could be pulled apart by distance and disagreement. She had watched relationships crumble under the pressure of competing loyalties and different visions of the future. She feared not scandal or tabloid headlines, but something far quieter and more painful. She feared her sons growing so far apart that they would become strangers to each other. She feared one of them choosing a path so different that the family bonds would snap like threads pulled too tight. The inheritance she left behind came with something most people never talk about. It came with conditions, not written in anger or control, but in love and deep concern. The money was meant to flow freely to her sons, but only if certain things remained true, only if they stayed connected to the family structure that had shaped them, only if they honored the roles they were born into, even when those roles felt heavy, only if they did not walk so far away that coming back became impossible. These conditions were not about obedience, they were about connection. Diana understood that money without family is just paper and numbers. She understood that true inheritance is the web of relationships that hold you when you fall, the shared memories that remind you who you are, the sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. She wanted her sons to have financial freedom, yes, but not at the cost of losing each other. There is a kind of prophecy that mothers carry, not written in stars or ancient texts, but in the quiet knowing that comes from loving someone completely. Diana sensed, perhaps without even putting it into words, that her youngest son would one day face an impossible choice. She sensed that he might meet someone who would show him a different way of living, someone who would help him see that he did not have to accept suffering as part of his birthright. And she knew that this awakening, beautiful as it might be, could lead him away from everything familiar. This was Diana's hidden warning, her quiet concern whispered across time. She knew that love could be powerful enough to make someone brave. She knew that the right person could give Harry the strength to stand up and say no to a system that had crushed her spirit. But she also knew that bravery and distance are sometimes twins, born from the same moment of decision. She knew that choosing yourself can mean losing your place at the table where your family sits. The inheritance was her way of speaking to her sons from beyond the grave, of saying she saw them, she understood them, she wanted them to be free, but please, please do not let freedom turn into loneliness. Do not let independence become isolation. Do not trade one kind of prison for another, where you have money but no history, security but no roots, peace but no belonging. When Harry made his choice to step away, to build a new life across the ocean with the woman he loved, he likely did not think about the legal terms buried in trust documents. He thought about survival and sanity and protecting the people who mattered most. He thought about breaking cycles and choosing differently than the generations before him. These were good thoughts, brave thoughts, the kind of thoughts his mother would have understood in her bones. But the inheritance could not follow him into that new life. Not because Diana would have wanted to punish him, but because the very structure she created was built on the foundation of family connection. When that connection stretched too thin, when the duties were set aside and the royal role was stepped back from, the conditions were no longer met. The money, meant to provide freedom within the family, could not flow to someone who had chosen to stand outside it. Diana's love remains, vast and unchanging as the ocean. But love alone cannot rewrite legal documents or bend the rules of trusts set up decades ago. Her inheritance was never just money. It was a hope, a prayer, a mother's desperate wish that her sons would have both freedom and family, both independence and connection. She never imagined they might have to choose between them. And while one son would come to test those boundaries, the other would grow up learning how to carry them, silently, steadily, and without the luxury of walking away. Keep watching to find out what happened next. William, the keeper of what remained. William had always known he would be king. From the moment he could understand words, he understood this truth about himself. It was not a choice or a dream or something he could walk away from when it became difficult. It was simply who he was, written into his name and his future like ink that could never be erased. And because he knew this, because he had accepted it with the kind of quiet strength that comes from having no other option, he learned early how to carry weight that would crush most people. But being the heir was only part of William's story. He was also a brother, a son who remembered his mother's laugh and the way she hugged them both so tightly, it felt like she was trying to press love directly into their hearts. He remembered the way Diana would ruffle their hair and break royal protocol just to make them smile. He remembered her tears too, the ones she tried to hide but could not always manage. He remembered overhearing conversations he was too young to fully understand, sensing tension in rooms that should have felt safe. As William grew older, as he stepped more fully into his royal duties and began to see the palace machinery from the inside, he started to understand things his younger self had missed. He began to piece together the puzzle of his mother's fears, the warnings she had whispered, and the protections she had tried to build. Diana had not just worried about her sons being unhappy, she had worried about them being torn apart, split by forces stronger than brotherly love, separated by choices that seemed right in the moment but carried consequences that echoed through generations. When Harry met Meghan, William felt something shift. He saw his brother come alive in a way he had not seen in years. He saw happiness and hope and the electric energy of new love. And he was glad for it, truly glad, because he wanted Harry to find what he himself had found with Catherine. He wanted his brother to know the steadiness of partnership, the comfort of having someone who understood you completely. But William also saw something else, something that made his stomach tighten with a familiar dread. He saw patterns repeating. He saw his brother falling for someone who did not fully understand the weight and complexity of royal life, someone who came from a world where personal freedom was valued above duty and tradition. He saw conversations growing tense around family dinner tables. He saw his father's concerned face and his grandmother's carefully neutral expression. He saw the institution beginning to brace itself for impact, the way ancient buildings brace when they sense a storm coming. William tried to talk to Harry. He tried to express his concerns in the careful language of brothers who love each other but see the world differently. He did not say, "Do not marry her." He did not say, "She is wrong for you." He said, "Slow down, take time. Make sure you understand what you are choosing and what you might be giving up." But his words came out sounding like doubt, like disapproval, like the voice of the very system Harry was beginning to question. The gap between them widened slowly, so slowly that neither of them noticed until it was already too large to cross with a simple conversation. Harry heard William's caution as betrayal. William heard Harry's defensiveness as proof that something fundamental was changing. They were still brothers. They still shared a lifetime of memories and private jokes and the unbreakable bond of having lost their mother together. but they were standing on opposite sides of a divide that grew wider with each passing month. When Harry and Meghan announced they were stepping back from royal duties, William felt the full weight of what his mother had feared settle onto his shoulders. This was it. This was the moment Diana had somehow sensed might come, the moment when love and duty would pull her sons in different directions. William understood, perhaps better than anyone else in the family, that Harry was not just leaving royal life, he was leaving the web of connection that held everything together. He was choosing a different kind of freedom, one that existed outside the structures and traditions and, yes, the inheritances that bound them all. William had access to information that Harry did not. He understood the legal frameworks, the trust documents, the careful arrangements Diana had made. He knew about the conditions, the terms, the requirements that seemed simple on paper but carried enormous emotional weight. And he knew, with a clarity that hurt like a physical wound, that when Harry stepped away from his royal role, the inheritance could not follow him. This knowledge did not make William happy. It did not make him feel victorious or satisfied or pleased that he had stayed while his brother had left. Instead, it made him feel like a keeper of something precious and broken, a guardian of their mother's intentions in a world where those intentions could no longer be fully honored. He was the son who stayed, not because it was easier, but because he believed someone had to protect what Diana had left behind. Someone had to maintain the connections she had valued so deeply. Someone had to carry the burden of continuity even when it meant watching his brother walk away. William did not make the decision to freeze the inheritance. That was not how it worked. The decision was already made years ago, written into legal terms and conditions that automatically triggered when certain circumstances changed. But William was in a position to confirm what was happening, to understand it, to see the full picture that Harry, from across the ocean, could not see. And in those quiet moments of understanding, William recognized his mother's wisdom and her fear woven together like threads in a tapestry. Diana had known. She had known that love could be powerful enough to pull her sons apart. She had known that the right circumstances could lead one of them to choose separation over tradition. She had known, and she had tried to build protections that would encourage connection, that would make walking away carry a real cost. Not to be cruel, but to be honest. Not to punish, but to preserve. William carries this knowledge like a stone in his chest. He is the keeper of what remained, the brother who understands both sides but can only stand on one. He loves Harry still, misses the closeness they once shared, grieves the distance between them, but he also understands that some choices change everything, that freedom sometimes comes with loss, and that their mother's prophecy was not mystical or magical but simply the clear seeing of a woman who had loved them both enough to fear for their future. Protection sometimes looks like refusal. Love sometimes requires boundaries. And the brother who stays must carry the weight of remembering why the structures exist, even when those structures feel cold and unforgiving to the brother who leaves. But those structures were never built by one man or one family alone. They belong to something older, larger, and far less flexible than any single relationship. What happens when protection feels like punishment? Continue watching to find out. When protection feels like punishment, the royal family is more than just people sitting around a dining table passing salt and sharing stories. It is an institution that has survived wars and revolutions and centuries of change by following one simple rule: protect the structure, above all else. Individual feelings matter, personal happiness counts, but when the survival of something ancient and larger than any one life is at stake, the institution moves like a glacier, slow and unstoppable, and completely unmoved by the warmth of human emotion. When Harry stepped away, when he chose his new life across the ocean, the institution did not react with anger or spite. It reacted the way a body reacts when it senses danger, closing ranks and tightening its grip on what remained. This was not personal. This was a survival instinct built over 1,000 years of existence. The palace had seen princes who rebelled before. It had seen scandals and departures and family members who could not bear the weight of royal duty. And it had learned, through painful experience, that protecting the whole sometimes means letting go of the parts that try to break free. The inheritance was never just a gift sitting in a bank account waiting for Harry to claim it. It was part of a larger system, a carefully constructed web of trusts and legal arrangements designed to support members of the royal family who fulfilled their roles. Diana had created these arrangements with love, yes, but also with clear understanding that royal privilege comes attached to royal responsibility. You cannot have one without the other. The money flows because you serve. The security exists because you represent the crown. The inheritance transfers because you remain part of the living, breathing institution. When Harry stepped back from royal duties, when he announced he would no longer represent the Queen or the country in official capacity, something fundamental changed in this equation. He was still Diana's son. He still carried her DNA and her memory and her love in his heart. But he was no longer functioning as a working member of the royal family. And the systems that Diana had set in place, the legal structures meant to protect and provide for her sons, had built into them a basic assumption that both boys would stay within the fold. The trustees who managed Diana's estate were not villains in expensive suits twirling their mustaches and cackling over Harry's misfortune. They were lawyers and family advisors who had one job: honor Diana's intentions as written in legal documents. And those documents, clear as daylight once you understood the legal language, tied the inheritance to participation in royal life. Not in a cruel way, not as a trap, but as a natural connection between privilege and duty. The institution was simply following the rules Diana herself had helped create. But here is the terrible thing about rules and systems and institutions: they cannot feel. They cannot see the tears in Harry's eyes or hear the desperation in his voice when he talks about needing to protect his own family. They cannot understand the suffocating weight of being watched every moment of every day, or the special kind of pain that comes from feeling like you are drowning in plain sight while people assume you should be grateful for your golden cage. Systems see only facts. Did he fulfill his royal duties? No. Therefore, the conditions are not met. Therefore, the inheritance is frozen. To Harry, this feels like punishment. It feels like his family reaching across the ocean to slap him for daring to choose happiness over tradition. It feels like being told that his mother's love came with strings attached, that even from beyond the grave, Diana's gift to him requires obedience and surrender. He gave up so much already. He walked away from the only life he had ever known. He sacrificed relationships and reputation and the comfort of belonging to something ancient and powerful. And now he discovers that even the inheritance his mother left him, the money she set aside specifically for her sons, cannot reach him because he dared to choose differently. From Harry's perspective, looking back at the family and institution he left behind, this looks like cruelty disguised as procedure. It looks like proof that the royal family values control more than love, tradition more than individual well-being. It confirms every fear he had about what would happen if he stepped out of line, every suspicion that acceptance was always conditional, that love within the palace walls came with a price tag attached. But the institution sees something entirely different. It sees itself as the guardian of Diana's true intentions, the keeper of structures she helped create because she understood something Harry has forgotten, that inheritance is not just about giving people money. It is about maintaining connections across generations. It is about ensuring that the family wealth supports the family mission. It is about preventing the very fragmentation and isolation that Diana feared most. The people managing these trusts believe, truly and deeply, that they are honoring Diana by enforcing the conditions she established. They believe they are protecting her legacy by making sure her money supports the institution she was part of, even when that institution hurt her. They see themselves as responsible stewards, not cruel gatekeepers. They think they are doing exactly what Diana would have wanted, preserving the structures that give meaning to royal inheritance. And here is the tragedy that sits at the heart of this entire story. Both sides believe they are honoring Diana. Harry believes he is honoring her by choosing mental health and authentic living over suffocating tradition. He thinks his mother, who died trying to find her own freedom, would understand why he had to leave. He believes she would want him to be happy more than she would want him to be royal. The institution believes it is honoring Diana by maintaining the careful balance she tried to create, by keeping her sons connected to the family structure through financial ties when emotional ties grow strained. It thinks she would want the inheritance to serve its original purpose, supporting working royals, not funding a separate life that exists in opposition to everything the family represents. Both sides are right, both sides are wrong. And Diana, the woman at the center of it all, the mother who loved her sons enough to fear for their future, is losing in both directions. Her money sits frozen, helping no one. Her sons drift further apart. Her prophecy fulfills itself not through magic but through the simple, terrible mathematics of systems that cannot bend and people who cannot stay. Protection feels like punishment when you are the one being protected against your will. And the saddest part is that everyone involved truly believes they are doing the right thing. That belief, shared, sincere, and heartbreaking, was exactly the kind of moment Diana had always feared, long before anyone else could see it coming. So, let's find out more about this. The prophecy fulfilled, but not finished. Diana never claimed to see the future. She was not a mystic peering into crystal balls or reading messages in tea leaves. She was simply a mother who understood pain deeply enough to recognize its patterns before they fully formed. She knew what it felt like to marry into a system that seemed magical from the outside but felt like machinery from within. She knew the specific loneliness of being surrounded by people yet feeling utterly alone. And because she knew these things in her bones, she could sense the shapes of struggles yet to come, the way sailors sense storms before they appear on the horizon. Her prophecy was not written in ancient scrolls or whispered in dramatic moments. It was written in trust documents and legal conditions, in the careful architecture of inheritance designed to encourage connection. It was spoken in the quiet conversations she had with advisors about protecting her sons not just from poverty, but from the kind of isolation that eats away at the soul. She feared distance more than scandal. She feared her boys becoming strangers more than she feared tabloid headlines. And she built protections, not perfect ones but the best she could manage, meant to keep them tethered to each other and to the family that shaped them. Now, years after her death, with Harry living thousands of miles from the palace and the inheritance frozen in legal limbo, Diana's fears have taken solid form. The prophecy has fulfilled itself not through magic but through the simple, sad progression of choices made with good intentions that led to painful consequences. Harry chose love and freedom. The institution chose preservation and tradition, and somewhere in the space between these choices, the connections Diana valued most began to fray like old rope under too much weight. But here is the thing about prophecies, the thing that makes them different from curses. They are warnings, not sentences. They are meant to wake people up, to make them see what could happen if they do not change course. And a prophecy fulfilled is not the same as a story finished. Diana's fears have come true, yes. Her son has walked away. The inheritance meant to support him sits untouched, frozen by conditions he can no longer meet. The brothers who once shared everything now live separate lives on separate continents, their relationships strained by distance and disagreement and the weight of different choices. Yet the story is not over. Stories about families never truly end. They pause. They hibernate. They wait for the moment when someone brave enough decides to reach across the divide and try again. William understands this in a way Harry cannot quite see yet. William, the keeper of what remained, knows that time changes things. He knows that anger softens, that perspectives shift, that the hurts that feel permanent today might become bearable tomorrow. He carries the burden of staying, but he also carries hope that staying does not mean Harry is lost forever. William thinks about his mother often, especially in the quiet moments between royal duties when he can let his guard down and simply be a son who misses his mum. He wonders what she would say if she could see them now, her two boys living such different lives, connected by blood and history but separated by oceans and choices. He thinks she would be sad, certainly. She would grieve the distance between them, but he does not think she would give up hope. Diana never gave up on anything that mattered to her, and her sons mattered more than anything else in the world. Harry carries his own relationship with his mother's memory. He talks to her sometimes in his head, tells her about his children, about the life he is building, about the choices he has made that he hopes she would understand. He wants to believe she would be proud of him for choosing differently, for breaking the cycles that crushed her spirit, for protecting his own family the way he wished someone had protected her. But there are moments, quiet moments, when the California sunshine feels too bright and the distance feels too vast, when he wonders if he has honored her or disappointed her, if his freedom is what she wanted or if she wanted something he cannot quite name. The inheritance sits frozen, but Diana's legacy flows through both her sons in ways no trust document could ever capture. William inherited her sense of duty transformed into strength, her ability to connect with ordinary people, her understanding that service means showing up even when it is hard. Harry inherited her rebellious spirit, her willingness to question systems that harm people, her fierce protectiveness of the ones she loves, her desire to use privilege for good beyond the palace walls. Both sons carry pieces of their mother. Both honor her in different ways, and the tragedy is not that one way is right and the other wrong, but that these different ways of honoring the same woman have led them down paths that diverge instead of running parallel. Diana wanted them to have freedom and connection, independence and family, the ability to be themselves while still belonging to each other. She wanted both things at once, and her sons have each chosen one half of her dream while letting the other half slip away. Inheritance can be frozen by legal conditions and institutional rules, but legacy cannot. Legacy lives in the way Harry speaks to his children about kindness and authenticity. It lives in the way William approaches his royal duties with compassion and genuine care for the people he serves. It lives in both of them, flowing like an underground river that cannot be stopped by paperwork or distance or even estrangement. Some losses are preventable. Diana knew this. She tried to prevent the specific loss of her sons drifting apart by building financial structures that encourage togetherness. But some losses must be experienced before they can be understood. Harry had to leave to know what leaving costs. William had to stay to understand the weight of preservation. The institution had to enforce its rules to reveal how rigid rules can wound the very people they mean to protect. The prophecy is fulfilled, but the story is not finished. Somewhere in the future, perhaps next year or perhaps in a decade, there might be a moment. A phone call that lasts longer than usual. A visit that breaks years of distance. A grandchild who brings together uncles who have forgotten how to be brothers. Diana's greatest wish was never about wealth or titles or even about who stayed and who left. Her greatest wish was that her sons would love each other, support each other, and find ways to stay connected even when life pulled them in different directions. That wish still lives, waiting like a seed in frozen ground for the right conditions to let it grow again. So what do you think about Harry's inheritance being frozen and Diana's warning coming true? Was it protection, consequence, or the unspoken rules of royalty at work? If this story made you see the family in a new light, stay curious and follow for more untold royal truths.